Good morning, everybody. Semi Park Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. We are waiting for people to join us for the True City Budget Networking Workshop. Hey, John, good to see you, one of our chairs for this networking session.
How you doing, Simi?
Hey, good to see you. And while folks are signing on, please note that this session is being recorded and the chat function is available. So John and members of this networking session, please let me know how we can assist, and congratulations on your first virtual session.
Pretty cool. I know. I'm very excited for this. And I see like a number of budget advocates. I see Liz, and then I see some familiar faces. I see Margarita here. Awesome. I see Pamela from my neighborhood council. Very great. Awesome. Okay. I think hopefully Jack is joining us, right?
Yeah, Jack's on his way.
Great.
I'll probably do just a brief intro and then solicit questions from the floor, which we all can then address as appropriate.
Yeah, excellent. That sounds great.
And good morning, this is Christina from the Controller's Office. He should be on his way soon too.
Great.
So what do we all think? I actually thought it was a very fast 2 hours, or even 2.5 hours at this point, right? I thought, and I was with the kids for most of it, and it was breezing by. It was like good info. Seamless.
Well planned.
Yeah, well planned. And then, I know Tony had a huge part in that, and I'm like lucky that he's also on my neighborhood council too. So I'm going to have to pick his brain for some of the stuff that, we've been talking about, Liz.
Right. I think I saw some good stuff. I know that when people who are like the mayor and stuff, it was nice to see him full screen, but we also need to make sure that any interpreter is visible at the same time.
Yeah, I think like one of the helpful things, and I guess like while people are rolling in, one of the things I can help point out is that if you are on a computer or if you're on your cell phone and someone does start sharing their screen, one of the things you can do is swipe on your phone. So you're gonna like click on their picture and swipe to a different screen, and then you can actually get like a multi-panel view of everyone. And if you're on your computer, if you do see like one big screen with like, unfortunately, my face in bland background on it right now, you can double click on that to like minimize it, and then you should be able to see like a multi-panel view, which you can keep separate. And I would highly recommend if you do that, you can minimize your window, like scale it down and have them side by side if you don't have two monitors available.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Email Jack.
I think we're actually still like 8 minutes early too, so I'm sure some of the panelists are taking a moment to stretch their legs.
Yeah, because I think Julia was also coming, and possibly Albert.
Excellent. Yeah, and I see Gary's here too now. So yeah, we have a number of our budget team here, budget committee. Yeah, this is great.
And somebody from my very beginning, Alvina, welcome.
Welcome, everyone. For those who are just signing in, just know that this networking session is being recorded, and want to welcome everyone. So thank you, John and Liz, for your leadership.
Oh, thank you, Simi.
Thanks, Liz. Great to see you.
It's been a while, hasn't it? I keep thinking of you. Yeah.
I miss you all, the budget advocates.
Yeah. I know you've been very, very busy.
That's right. 6 years on the council though now, and as president, I got more responsibilities.
Right.
Oh, which NC?
Central Hollywood.
Central Hollywood. Great. Very nice. I'm up in Panorama City. But I used to work in Hollywood. Yeah.
Oh, well, come down to the Walk of Fame. That's going to be changing in the years to come.
I can't wait. Like, honestly, like I used to work in Hollywood, and now that I don't anymore, it's like for all the years that I think I finally did just grow accustomed to driving straight through. Now I'm like, I kind of miss it. having the option to just like pop on down over there, and especially the Dave and Buster's that opened up over there. I love that on Hollywood.
Yeah. I do love our neighborhood. Thank you.
While we're waiting, people may or may not, well, a lot of people probably know we've been working on getting an updated website, and it went live this morning. There's still some things to be cleaned up, but it's pretty impressive. If you want to go to budgetadvocates.org, it'll probably still redirect to budgetadvocates.com, but it'll be the same website. We're in the process of changing over to budgetadvocates.org. And we hope for you to come, find answers to things, reach out to us. There's lots of information about the new people and about the committees we've been working with.
Yeah, I have to say, I can't wait till she gets here. Julia did a great job with that. I know it was like no small feat, and we had the great support. So that was one thing that we've been missing. Bum, bum, bum. I guess like while we're waiting, we can all kind of share. I know we've heard from a couple people where we're from, but everybody on the line, feel free to unmute yourself and kind of share at least what part of the city, if you're not on a neighborhood council, or which neighborhood council you're on. We can get going with that. That'd be awesome.
Because I'm unmuted at the moment while other people figure out how to unmute. I'm actually the budget rep for Historic Highland Park, and because I'm co-chair of the Budget Advocates, it takes up a little bit of my time, so I'm not on the board, Highland Park board itself. And I live and work and I advocate for Northeast Los Angeles. And here's Jack.
We were just doing some self-introductions. Jack, you want to go ahead and anybody that maybe didn't catch you in the first session, introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted, brother. Hold on, let me get you. Or Simi, maybe can you unmute Jack, if you wouldn't mind?
Or maybe Jack has to.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
I'm unmuted myself.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, I probably have a few more people to go. Hope so.
So we're just saying where we're from, briefly.
Well, yeah, I'll go next, I guess. I'm John DiGregorio, everybody. I'm the vice chair of outreach and communication along with Julia for the Budget Advocates, and I'm also chair of the Panorama City Neighborhood Council. So thank you for joining us today. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, my name's Jack Humphreyville. I'm a stakeholder in the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council. Along with Liz Amstead, I'm the co-chair of the Budget Advocates, and I've written a few articles regarding the city's budget for City Watch.
Okay. Who's going to unmute themselves next?
Yeah, I think, if you're having some trouble, maybe one of the things, I know you can raise your hand and Simi can hopefully help us out with getting you unmuted there. For everybody that doesn't know, there should be, if you open your panelist window, a raise hand button, or if you're on video, do one of these if you can't figure it out, and *9 on your phone.
Okay, well, I'll pipe up since
There
you
we go.
already acknowledged me. I'm Pamela Giberman, and I'm on the Panorama City Neighborhood Council along with my buddy John over there. So looking forward to hearing what we have to talk about later today.
Carol, we're just doing introductions, where we're from.
Carol Newman, Lake Balboa Neighborhood Council, and I'm also a budget advocate and the parliamentarian of the Budget Advocates.
Okay. Christina?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Christina Yavara, and I'm part of the Controller's Community Engagement Team. So I'm staffing him today, and he is right there on the screen as well.
Just came up as Christina.
Excellent. That
Do we want, and there's
doing
Julie.
some self-introductions. That might be a perfect time to allow you the time if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Barbara Brody, why don't you introduce yourself? You're a troublemaker from the West Side.
You have to unmute. Okay.
Okay, I'm Barbara Brady from West Side Neighborhood Council, member chair of the Land Use Committee.
Barbara?
Julia?
Hi, sorry, just taking it up there. I'm Julia Moser. I'm the social media coordinator for the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council and a new budget advocate for Region 5 with Jack.
Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Ringette, and I'm from the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council, and I've been a budget advocate now for about 7 years. Hi, everybody.
David Levin? Julia?
Another Julia?
No. Sorry, I missed you. Okay, you go. Anna Martinez?
Hi, good morning. My name is Ana Martinez, born and raised Inglewood, Westchester, California. So I've been a resident my whole life, and I'm just here as a resident, participant, and learner.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
Hi, good morning.
Mercedes,
Margarita?
go ahead.
Oh, hi, I just want to say good morning. I'm a new board member, only about a month. I was elected last month for Echo Park Neighborhood Council on the Budget and Finance Committee.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you.
Margarita?
Margarita Lopez, MacArthur Park Neighborhood Council, and member de Valle de Arcais.
Thank you. Edmund, since you're also a budget advocate.
Hi, my name is Edmund Warren. I'm the treasurer for Empowerment Congress West and also a budget advocate.
Gary?
Yes, Gary Fordyce, budget advocate, Region 2. Been involved with the budget advocates for 4 years, going on my 5th, and just reelected for 2 more years. Currently not serving on a board, but I'm still active. I'm still involved. As I hear said, I'm everywhere. And I qualify for several councils. I'm just focusing on the budget advocates right now. Thank you.
Okay, I think that we've now hit 11:30, so we should probably start when people who haven't introduced themselves first speak, they can say where they're from. Ron, do you want to say something at the beginning?
You're still muted.
Ron, you have to mute yourself.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, because it was asking me to put in a password before, and I kept on putting that password in, and it was not working. So
It's a conspiracy.
It usually is, isn't it? So just so that I understand, I see there are 27 participants on, which is fantastic. And I was asked sort of to do a little bit of an intro. Shall I do that? And then we kind of open it up for conversation and questions?
Okay. Why don't you go first, and then I'll do a little intro and open it up.
Okay, well, please go ahead and do the intro.
Liz, why don't you do an intro for the neighborhood budget advocate?
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I just didn't want to step on Ron because he's an important person in my life.
Oh, come on. Everybody on this call is an important person.
Very true. Okay, well, the budget advocates are an elected, all-volunteer, independent advisory body charged with making constructive recommendations on the city's budget to the mayor and city council and inspiring city departments to improve their operations. Budget advocates also solicit stakeholder input on city services. We inform Angelenos on the city's financial management and report on the city's progress. Our mission, as is stated on our website, is to engage with neighborhood councils and stakeholders on the city's financial condition to encourage the city to allocate its resources to improve services and quality of life for all Angelenos, to advocate for Los Angeles' true potential as one of the world's leading cities, and to bring transparency to the city's budget process. Jack told you this morning what we're facing, and Ron talked about the city's extended road to recovery. But let me assure you, the budget advocates will continue to advocate for full transparency and accountability as outlined in our call for radical transparency in last year's white paper. The budget advocates will be improving their outreach to neighborhood councils over the year by providing more education on the city's budget procedures and how they are affected, how they, the neighborhood councils, are affected, submitting updates on the budget and city's finances monthly, and developing deeper ties and soliciting ongoing input into our work. Most importantly, in this time of challenge, the budget advocates will be challenging City Hall to be the agents of change that will benefit all Angelenos by pivoting themselves, not only in words, but in actions, on the big issues of our day: equity, climate change, affordable housing, homelessness, racial disparities, infrastructure, police reform, and job creation, while simultaneously returning the city to a fiscally responsible budget. We are looking to you, to each one of you, for solutions, and that's what this networking session is about: is finding what your hopes and your solutions are. Ron?
Well, good morning. It's great to be with you, and thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much to Jack and to Suzanne Lewis for inviting me to be part of this. And I've been doing this for many years now, actually well before I even became a controller. As some of you may know, I originally developed my obsession with city finances when I was a member of my neighborhood council. I became a neighborhood council budget advocate, and I've seen how that process has evolved and matured along with our neighborhood councils over the course of the last couple of years, with people who come on that really have a great deal of knowledge and passion and interest and a lot of good ideas. And I know that some of those ideas sometimes are put in place, and sometimes it can be a frustrating process to get the point across to other people within the city. If it's any comfort, I find myself in that same position sometimes as well. So I wanted to thank you for everything that you're doing. This is a really challenging time for Los Angeles, for our state, for our nation, for our world, as I think we all know. The losses that we've had because of COVID, so many people who have unfortunately passed away, as well as people who just got sick. Unemployment, which in March more than tripled overnight in Los Angeles. It's now double what it was before COVID began. We've seen a tremendous number of businesses that have been shuttered, some permanently. We saw the terrible killing of George Floyd and the protests that followed, and also some of the unfortunate incidents that followed as well. No in-person schooling or religious services for the most part, a very contentious presidential election, and if all of that wasn't enough, fires in our midst, a little earthquake, and quite frankly, I'm ready for 2021 to begin at this point. But there's a lot of reasons that people are feeling anxious and worried and isolated and uncertain. There's also a lot of factors that are putting very severe and challenging impacts on budgets across the board of pretty much every government entity across the world. So what I want to do is share with you a little bit about the budget challenges, a little bit about what the budget process was and wasn't this year, and a little bit about where we see things going in the year to come and beyond that. So my role is, as many of you may know, as city controller, is to be the independent watchdog, one of the three citywide elected officials, to be the chief auditor, paymaster, accountant for the city. We distribute pretty much all the money that the city spends. We also prepare the financial reports. We have a waste, fraud, and abuse unit. We also, under the time that I started the city's first open data initiative, and I think many of you are familiar with the city's open checkbook and details about what the payroll is, and a lot of other kind of metrics and other kinds of open data that we have out there, which I know you use all the time as budget advocates. So every year we've been very accurate with our budget projections. of the budget season for the city, as it were. We released those on March the 1st, as we did this year. And this year, after March the 1st, everything changed and changed radically. And so we have revised those numbers since then. And we will continue to revise them as time goes by. The city undertook what it called something of a placeholder budget. And the reason for that was that it was kind of a guessing game of what revenues were going to be. We came up with 3 budget scenarios, as it were. One, you can see here in front of you, in terms of declines from the March 1st estimate. There was the rosy picture of only 194 million less. Then there was a middle scenario, and then there was the less desirable scenario of 600 million plus less than the March estimate. The mayor's budget actually was based on the rosiest of our scenarios. I certainly hoped that that would come to pass, but in fact, it's more aligned with the least attractive of the scenarios. And the longer that this goes on, the more that will be the case. The usual kind of budget hearings that went on did not happen this year. The idea was that most likely there would be changes, and we're already seeing some of those happen. There were a variety of different kinds of revenues that are impacted, as you might imagine. Interestingly enough, our property taxes are remaining pretty stable, which is a good thing. Part of that is the nature of property taxes. Part of that is, interestingly enough, the real estate market has been doing very well right now in LA despite COVID. We'll see how long that goes. But there's also reductions in terms of licenses, permits, fees, and fines, sales tax. We're, I think, inevitably going to see some significant reductions in business tax, hotel tax. The bottom basically fell out of that completely, and we don't see that recovering very well anytime soon, quite frankly, with travel being what it is. And we also have the special parking revenue fund that also has taken a hit. So all of these are impacting our budget. The reserve fund is right now at a number that is less than the 5%, which is the city's policy, as it were. Right now, it's just kind of short of that, but we'll see how long that is sustainable. And by the way, 5% is not a lot, but we are in better shape than many other cities, I will say, despite all of our challenges, because we have a pretty diverse set of revenue sources. We've had some reserves. We have a very robust treasury. Right now we have about $11 billion in our treasury, although that number goes up and down over the course of the year. And so we hope for the best, but we have to plan for what happens if that's not the case. There's also cuts that were made to the LAPD budget, but the original budget that was proposed by the mayors, I'm sure many of you know, cutting it by about $150 million from what it was going to be for this fiscal year. 97 million of that coming from funds that were earmarked for overtime pay, although there would still be some significant monies for overtime pay. But interestingly enough, what the budget was for 1920, which passed, was 1.734 billion for LAPD. It's going to be 1.707 billion for 2021. So it's not really a significant decrease, but obviously costs go up. And so de facto, what that is going to mean is some reduction in certain kind of services. Moreover, with the furloughs that are being likely implemented starting in October, while it will not apply to sworn employees, it would apply to civilians. And we have many civilians who are at LAPD. And if they're furloughed, then some of that work might actually be done by police officers, interestingly enough, at a higher rate than it would have been done by the civilians. We could talk about whether that makes sense or not. Concerns for this coming year. I mentioned falling short of what the original estimates were. We know that many of these sources are not going to recover anytime soon. There are salary increases that went into effect last year. There's still some yet to go into effect, and we'll see what happens with those. There's, of course, the issue of pensions, which was outstanding even before this began, and will continue to be an issue, although so far, right now, investments of the city are doing well. But as we all know, there are tremendous vicissitudes to the stock market, and what goes up sometimes goes down. I will say that we have received some rather significant amounts of money from the federal government for COVID-related expenditures, actually $745.6 million. It's essentially use it or lose it. We're supposed to use it by the end of this year, which would be the 31st of December. There's some discussion with Washington, D.C. about extending that so that we don't either A, have to return it, or B, spend it in a profligate way. It may only be used for COVID-related expenditures at this moment. Of that $745 million, about $100 million is being spent for rent relief, about $100 million for homeless-related expenditures. We can talk about how well that money is being used, however. $40 million for small business and nonprofits as part of the LA Regional Recovery Fund. There's been approved by committee, but not yet by council, $50 million for a local paycheck assistance program, proposals for $1 million economic recovery and job training pilot program, $5 million for street vending recovery fund. So there is an ad hoc committee, as many of you may know, of the council that is looking into how these monies may or may not be spent. What I did almost immediately once COVID began was to work with the departments, the CAO, to properly code every single expenditure that may be COVID related. I don't want to leave money on the table or, heaven forbid, have to return any of it to Washington, D.C., because we really, really do need it. I mean, we've spent, as of the last count, it's going to, be close to $100 million for testing, for example. And we've had salaries for disaster service workers and much, much more. I will say that I like to consider myself to be a realist, but also something of an optimist, in that we do have a very diverse economy in Los Angeles. We have a lot of wonderful and very creative people. We have a lot of reasons for the economy of the city to come back, even though our unemployment numbers are higher than other parts of the country and other parts of the state. Used to be, by the way, that California would be the last to go in recession and the first to emerge. That's no longer true. But there are still a lot of, while challenges, some good fundamentals. I also see some interesting opportunities in terms of the growth of so many businesses that people are starting at their kitchen table or in their bedrooms, new kinds of jobs that are being created, a growth in telemedicine, which will hopefully make medical care more accessible to more people. I've actually had that kind of a visit myself with my doctor, and it was great. I didn't have to park or spend time driving or riding the elevator or anything else. But we're going to have to make sure, by the way, that with more of these kinds of opportunities and tremendous remote learning opportunities, that people have access to really high-speed internet no matter where they live, affordable high-speed internet, because otherwise your gap between the haves and have-nots will only become further exacerbated. And I believe we have a responsibility to not just come back, but come back in a way that really brings a greater amount of equity to our city. And to use this opportunity and not miss this opportunity to really look at how can we become more effective, more efficient, more fair, um, and really use the monies of the city, which are never going to be unlimited, in a way that better serves the people of Los Angeles. And then, I'm also seeing in my own office, I will concede that I had some real questions about what was remote work going to look like. And I've been amazed by how well the people in my own office have performed, with more than 80% of them working remotely and working harder and getting actually more done than before, which tells us a lot about what changes we might see in the workplace in terms of providing flexibility to people, in terms of maybe even reducing traffic a little bit in the process. And when I talk about being an optimist, I'm the first in my family to be born in this country, and my parents came here speaking no English except a little that they learned from British and American movies. And they were thankfully able to create a great life for themselves. And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do right now. But I believe that we have the resources and the capability and the know-how to try and make sure that the next generation and the next generation find Los Angeles continue to be a welcoming and prosperous and well-run city. And you're an important part of that, because it's important that you watch along with me. I'm called the city's chief watchdog, but it's impossible to watch everything. And your role is really crucial in that and in providing necessary input. So with that, I'll open it up and say thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you on this Saturday morning, almost to be Saturday afternoon in 9 minutes.
Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Ron, I have a quick question. What's the level of the reserve fund right now? The last I saw, I think it was, it was like Eric said, it was like 260 million bucks, 3.9%. But I didn't know whether that was as of June 30th or as of
That
August.
was the number as of June 30th, correct. It has actually improved a little bit since then. Give me 1 second and I will tell you. All right, as of the latest count, it is just slightly under 5%. As of September the 15th, it was 325 million. 5% of a 6.7 billion general fund budget would be 335 million. But as we know, 5% is not really enough. But look, if in the middle of all of this mess, we're able to be just short of 5%, that's actually not too bad, all things considered.
Well, I guess the question is at year end at June 30th, it was like 260, and now it's 3.25. Where did the other $65 million come from when the cities, when the 7 economically sensitive stocks are getting clobbered?
So, well, and not the 7 economically sensitive stocks. You mean economically sensitive revenue sources, right?
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. All right. Just want to
Too much
clarify
Wall
that.
Street.
You are correct that as of July 1st, it was $262.5 million. However, as after you do closing, there's sort of monies that go back and forth. There's monies that did not get spent. There are loans that are made from the reserve that then get returned. So there's a variety of ways in which that money, came back into the reserve fund balance.
One of the issues that Jack has brought up a number of times, and you have as well, is that we are depending on a placeholder budget that was really not discussed. And there seems to be no way of comparing things to it because the situation is so fluid, so changing so quickly. How can we have some sort of transparency and accountability in this situation?
Sure. Well, look, what I seek to do is to put up every single expenditure of the city, the budget documents, all sorts of information about what revenue projections are, revised revenue projections, a lot of the information that I've kind of shared with you, we put out in some frequency with various financial reports. But let's also be honest about the following, which is that even in a regular budget season, you can have all of the hearings that you want, but how much of that actually really changes the budget in any significant way? Because the overwhelming amount of the money that we spend is for employee compensation, be that salaries, benefits, healthcare, pension, all those things. Those are almost set in stone before the budget because of various negotiations that happened with our labor representatives. And so even if you have a lot of those hearings, you're not going to have a lot of changes to the budget. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have very robust hearings. That doesn't mean that there's not still room for adjustments. But in many ways, and this is, by the way, true for the California budget as well, we kind of, with the current way that things are, kind of tinker around the edges because almost all the money is already spoken for before the process of the budget even really begins.
Thank you very much. I think like at this time, what we'd like to do is open it up to all of our participants here. We got a number of people with us. So if you do have a specific question for Jack or our controller, Mr. Galperin, Liz, or myself on how to get involved with us, please raise your hand at this time and we'll make sure to add you to the queue. I guess one thing, until I see some hands up there, Mr. Galperin, one thing I'm curious, could you maybe give us the number, out of our general fund, or out of our entire city budget, what is the fungible number that we could in fact play with? I know many cities explore budget, but I think that's an interesting topic. I know that speaking from an overhead perspective, that really is usually a very small piece of the pie.
Sure. All right. So to give the overall picture, okay, total budget, if you include all the proprietaries, and when I say proprietaries, I'm referring to, 3 business operations of the city, which are the Department of Water and Power and the LAWA, which is Los Angeles World Airports, that includes LAX, and the Port of Los Angeles. And by the way, those have their independent revenue sources, and those monies, for the most part, stay with those departments, with some exceptions that we could talk about. But overall, you add all of that up, and that's about $30 billion. But the proprietaries make up about 18 billion of that. Then there's the general city budget, which is about 10.5 billion, and then grants and other funds, another 1.5 billion. Now, of that 10.5 billion, not to get too detailed with you here, around 6.7 billion of that is general fund. Now, for the general city budget, roughly about 85% of it is for everything having to do with employee compensation. So that leaves you with kind of 15%. Okay. Mm-hmm. But then there are so many ongoing expenditures that we have that really are not kind of negotiable. Be they fuel purchases, be they the cost of keeping the lights on, be they supplies that you have to buy, all those kinds of, be they machinery, be they vehicles, what have you. So in that case, what you're kind of left with, I'm kind of taking a little bit of a stab at it, but when all is said and done, and I'd love Jack's perspective on it, maybe 3% on a good day. And, grants and other funds, that's in addition to that, but, that's based on, qualifying for certain kinds of grants that meet certain kinds of specific purposes, and we can only spend it for those specific purposes. So they're not exactly part of that budget process either. Jack, what number would you apply to fungible?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I mean, it's pretty much fixed costs, but that gets into the problem of, you mentioned 85%. I always thought it was like $6 or $7 billion for personnel expenses. To balance the budget for, let's say it's going to be short 400 million, which is, your guess is as good as mine. I actually think it's probably going to be more. Unfortunately, I think that's sort of the problem, is that where do you go to save that 400 or 500, $600 million? And that's people. And we already have a furlough program for the for 15,000 civilian workers, for 18 weeks or 18 pay days. That's going to start to be, where do you go? Well, do you start hitting the cops and the firefighters and public safety? Do you, start layoffs of the civilian workers? And layoffs is that's the L word as far as the unions are concerned. I mean, they go bonkers. Hell, they went bonkers on furloughs and did this stupid, inefficient separation incentive program that's probably going to cost us $100 million. But I think that the question is, how do you balance the budget? And given that everything's pretty much a fixed cost, and it's going to be very tough. And I think one of the issues that we're going to be, the city council and the mayor are going to be facing is, they're going to have to take some pretty drastic steps. And I agree with Ron's comment. You plan for the worst and hope for the best. I think that was your words.
Hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's sort of it's going to be it's going to be a pretty ugly time down at City Hall, having to go through these things. One of the things that, and Ron, this is sort of a question, is the city declared a state of financial emergency, and I think they have to renew it over, I think it's 30 days at a time. But by declaring that, I think they can get around a lot of the meet and confer requirements of the union contracts. And I don't know if that's true or not. I think it is. And maybe you could comment on that, Ron. But going ahead, and with layoffs and furloughs, it's going to be a real war, Ron.
So, I won't comment on the legal implications of that. That's more sort of a city attorney question. But yes, you are correct that there are certain requirements that are lesser when you've got sort of a financial state of emergency. But look, in the final analysis, we have to work together, and it's vital that we work together with the people who work for our city, who keep the place running. In the case of my office, okay, even before COVID began, the budget that we were saddled with in our office was an 18% cut. And by the way, because almost everything that my office spends is for salaries, benefits, all those kinds of things, that wasn't just a cut into the flesh, it was a cut into the bone. And then on top of that, you look at furloughs, which is another, say, 10% in reality. And then on top of that, for the coming budget year, there's already a letter from the mayor about wanting to see another 3% plus cut. So, you add 18% and 10% and 3%, you're already at like 1/3 of my office is about to get eviscerated. And I use that term because it's not just, little cuts. It will definitely impact what it is that we can do. And we're trying to do more with less, and we are trying to use technology, and we're trying to make choices about how we use the resources that we have. But there's only so many cuts that you can make without really impacting the quality of the work that we do.
Yeah,
and we're not the only ones.
I think
one of the things, Ron, that really honked me about your budget is I think they took you down from 4 auditors to 1 auditor. I forget what it was, but it was a pretty significant cut. And, that gets into your ability to go out there and, look at the homeless situation where, you made lots of friends by telling everybody it costs, $530,000 per unit. I mean, I think you took the brown helmet on that one from your friends at City Hall. And, I mean, it was a great report. But if they're
Thank
going
you.
to start cutting, your auditors, what does that do for transparency?
Well, it's harmful to transparency. And look, nobody likes bad news. And there's nothing particularly sexy about audits. And so now, mind you, it wasn't taking, we have more than 4 auditors. It was taking down our request. But having said that, we still have fewer ones today than there were 10 years ago, when in fact the budget of the city has grown exponentially since then. So we look at other ways to increase transparency. But ironically, what we got punished for was the fact that it's very hard to find people through our civil service system to fill certain kind of positions, especially if you want to hire someone who's mid-level or upper level. That's really, really hard. You're just stealing them from other departments. You can't, for the most part, bring them in from the outside, which was the subject of another audit that I did, which was really pointing out the problems with that system. But because many of those positions remained vacant, the budgetary czars said, well, obviously you don't need these positions, so we can take them out of the budget. But that's not true. We really needed them, but we just were unable to, given the rules, actually hire some people to fill those positions.
I'd like to quickly go back to something that was brought up at the very first budget day I attended, which is the siloization of the city departments. And clearly, the city has been unable to address this problem right now. And I think part of it is because it's a bigger picture issue. I think that solutions have been suggested in terms of a city manager to look at it all, so we don't have the departments individually doing their budget. So we look at the overall view, and also with multi-year budgeting. And I think we have Harvey and then Gary with their hands up. Harvey?
All right. Thank you, Liz. And this is very, very interesting. And we've talked about budgets and budget cuts. I want to sort of switch it around a little bit and talk about deferred maintenance. And sort of throw out to Ron, and I know it's a very, very difficult question, but do we have any idea as to what the magnitude of the deferred maintenance in this city is? Because deferred maintenance is no different in my mind than a bond issue that we have to, come back and pay at some point. And I'm looking at streets, sidewalks, tree maintenance, building maintenance, equipment maintenance, parks, et cetera, et cetera. And
well, there's no question that there's a tremendous amount of deferred maintenance. And by the way, officially the city cannot run a budget deficit. Okay, we can't print money. We have officially, a balanced budget. Okay, sometimes with smoke and mirrors, but often comes at a cost of not really investing in the long term. And particularly in infrastructure. And look, Los Angeles had its building, several building booms, okay? But one of the biggest building booms was, in the 1920s. And that means that the infrastructure that was put in for that building boom is now 100 years old. And it is very, very costly to replace. And nobody really wants to pay for it. I mean, you look at DWP, Jack's favorite subject, and nobody really wants to see their rates go up, but it costs a lot of money to replace the infrastructure that is under the streets, and to dig up those streets and to change that. And so every now and then you see a problem with that infrastructure. This is going to be continuing to be a challenge. And, normally bonds were a way to do this. And by the way, interest rates are super low right now. I just don't know, frankly, that the voters would have a huge appetite for taking on bonded indebtedness. Interestingly enough, we're not heavily leveraged either. We're actually our leverage is pretty low historically in the city of Los Angeles. So it might not be a bad idea to take some bond money and do that. It's also a good way to maybe create some jobs and some economic vitality. But the problem is when people see the outrageous costs associated with doing some of these infrastructure things, or you look at Triple H, it erodes confidence that voters might have in saying, let's approve a couple $2 billion worth of bonds. But look, you know, the city entered into a $1 billion settlement, for example, for sidewalk repairs over 30 years. Will that really get it done? I'm not so sure. That's 30 years is a long time. There's a lot of deferred maintenance, and I want to say that that should be a priority. I don't know that that will be at this very moment.
Yeah, I think, you know, a couple of years ago, Miguel Santana, probably more than a couple of years ago, you know, mentioned that the deferred maintenance budget was about $10 billion. And that included, you know, let's say streets which at that point in time was $4 billion, you know, sidewalks, which was $1 billion or $2 billion, parks, a variety of things. It also included the IT infrastructure. And, you know, so there's a lot of things involved in that. And I don't think there's been any real analysis of it. I mean, I think we went through the street stuff, the street analysis, I think a couple of years ago, and Buscaino and Englander, bye-bye Mitch, Englander, you know, did that study, or they were pushing, I think, a 0.5-cent sales tax increase or something, or a parcel tax to finance the streets. And that sort of died when I think, Ron, you put out a report talking about the inefficiency of street services. So even if we did a bond offering, you know, the question you'd have is, can we do it efficiently? And you get into sort of all sorts of management problems and bureaucracies and stuff like that if they're handled by the city, which I think they're required to by the charter because of the contracting regulations. But $10 billion, you know, that's right up there with the pension liability. So it's a big number.
Yeah, it was not my intent to indicate that we should bond it. I was trying to say that it is no different than having a bond out there.
Yes.
It is a liability to the city. You know, the thought is these are things that we've taken out of our operating budget and just kicked the can down the road and have created greater problems for us in the future.
Look, I know in my own neighborhood, this neighborhood was laid out in the 1920s with concrete streets. It's in the hills. And the streets are in abominable condition, horrible from being cut into, you know, year after year after year after year. What it would cost to take up all of that concrete or to grind it down on all of these winding streets would be so expensive. I'm not necessarily expecting that to happen. Maybe not even my lifetime, unless we find some completely new technologies by which we can redo streets, which, you know, there are some promising technologies out there. And I think we have to look at different ways of doing things in order to make it possible to upgrade infrastructure.
Gary, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Jack. Good afternoon, Controller Galperin. It's great to see you again.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you for.
Actually, I don't see you. I see your name, but
I know. I'm sorry for that. My apologies. My comments and questions, I have two questions, will be focused on funding equity. Every key buzzword now, equity.
Yeah.
Your department has faced extensive cuts. I'm aware that the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, as well as the neighborhood councils, have had extensive cuts. And this is all following what was initially announced at the Budget Advocates, that the mayor wanted every department to cut 10%, except for police and fire. And my concern is Well, question number one, it would be nice if there was some kind of resource through your office to find out exactly what percent cuts all city departments have been required to take so that we can visually see what kind of equity is going on. And the second question is, it appears to me that it's possible that there's some political football going on, and it's pretty much on our virtual meetings with Zoom. This is a manner of muting certain entities and certain departments. And for my own interest, not only for your department, but for neighborhood councils in Dunn, we're supposed to be a partner in having a voice, and is one department muting another department to somewhat silence us? So thank you very much for your answer in advance.
Sure. Well, let's be frank. Politics always comes into to budget decisions. There's a lot of different reasons why certain departments take a bigger cut than others, but some of it also has to do with how the city is going to look, or with priorities. Look, you have, for example, cultural affairs is also going to probably take a big cut, and not necessarily because of politics, but because when it comes down to the what is it called, Maslow's that pyramid of what needs are, that while the arts are wonderful, for example, the needs of seniors to have meals may come out ahead of that at any given moment in time. Whether that's right or not is a different question, but there are inevitably tough choices that are going to have to be made. Your first question, remind me, my apologies, you were asking, I should have written this down. Gary?
First question was in regards to, through your office, are there any resources to show us what percentage is total each department?
So we do have a lot of resources, but we don't actually present the information in the way that you just mentioned it, in terms of what was the cut that was sustained by each department. But I like that idea, and I think that would be a good thing for us to do. So I'm going to have a conversation this week with our folks about what it would take to do it.
Thank you.
I like that idea.
Gary, to answer your question, I compared the 2021 budget with the 2020 budget, and it was basically off, the total $10 billion budget was off 1.1%, but the budgets overall, not including glaciers, the library and stuff like that, was actually up 1.2%. Certain people got more, for instance, the police department, which is, obviously huge. And so that's up to, that can't be right. I made a mistake there.
And
we have all this information, as obviously as part of our the annual financial report that we put together, which is a phone book size. We try and take as much of that as we can and visualize it, but I like visualizing that particular part of it.
Thank you. There are a couple clarifying questions that are out there, if I may. So there are a couple notes out there that regarding the cuts and the percentages being cut to each department. Are any of those departments revenue producing? And if so, is there any thought to whether the drop in headcount is going to be also, showing up on the drop in revenue? Are we also going to lose some of that? Like, I think building and safety would be one of them, or inspections, for example.
Right. That's a great question. Supposedly those positions that are identified as, revenue producing should not be subject to furlough. But then, we get into some interesting questions of, what is and what is not revenue producing. For example, for the longest time, everybody was talking about how everybody who gives tickets, that's a big source of revenue for the city, right? But, I did an analysis of this, and, those who think that it's a, big cash cow for the city, it's not, because by the time you figure in all of your costs of collections and personnel and the vehicles and the gas and the accidents and the this and the that, it's actually not a huge revenue source for the city. By the way, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, because it's important to have a sensible way in which we control how people park. But you also have, let's say, all these people who work for the for our Office of Finance. They're the ones who collect taxes. You could say that everybody there is revenue producing, and therefore nobody should be subject to furlough there. But not everybody is necessarily in a revenue producing position necessarily, and the functions of that office can continue, perhaps not as well ideally, but with some adjustments to a department like that's budget. But at least theoretically, okay, those that are revenue producing are not necessarily going to be quite in the same chopping block as others.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think one more question from the chat. This was also concerned about, again, like our drop in revenues, but about the fees that continue to be waived for large developers who are affecting our communities. Then specifically says they should be forced to pay their own share as we are. So, I'm not sure if your office has any insight into the magnitude of those, waivers of fees. But, has there been any analysis, or would you be able to, off the top of your head, give us some notes on the impact of that?
Sure. There are a lot of different kinds of, fees, fines, penalties, et cetera, that we can and should be collecting. I actually did an audit. This goes back now 2 years ago, looking at agreements that the city had entered into to give up over a 25-year period up to about $1 billion in various kinds of tax revenues that would have been achieved in exchange to provide money to largely hotel developers and largely in downtown Los Angeles. The idea was they presented to us a feasibility gap, saying, well, without the help of the city, we will not be able to build these hotels, and therefore, give us this money. I was opposed to it. I think, for example, originally when you look at the area around Staples Center and nobody wanted to build a hotel there was some necessity to do that. But then I really took issue with continuing to do that over the course of many years when hotel occupancy rates, at least at the time, were very high. And when there was plenty of money for building of hotels, I saw that as a giveaway that was very, very troublesome. I think that, look, there are some kind of projects that I think should not have the same kind of necessarily fees associated therewith. If you're talking about, let's say, creating more affordable housing or workforce housing or a project for those who are experiencing homelessness, I think that the more affordable we make it to build those things, the better. But I think that, the city needs the revenues. We want to be fair about it. We can only collect revenues that are based on what our expenses associated therewith are. But I'm not necessarily a huge fan of needlessly waiving certain fees sometimes for so-called friends.
Yeah, one thing.
Barbara,
Well, just a second, Liz. One thing about Ron's study is basic $1.1 billion was primarily the waiving of the hotel tax. But there are two different, a lot of them more associated with the convention center, although there's a couple that Herb Wesson is trying to do that are outside the convention area. But you differentiate between, let's say, Phil Anschut. One of the tough things you have here is Phil Anschut's a guy that's, I guess, worth $10 billion. Came in and did LA Live, where he was the first guy, first person into the neighborhood, and he had some pretty generous concessions. The other guys that came in were 3-star hotels as opposed to conventions type of hotels, and they sort of piled on. Those are the ones I had an objection to. Now you're going to have a dilemma. Is Anschutz is offering to put, Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, $550 million or $500 million into the convention center. And he's also at the same time going to put up a new 4-star hotel, convention hotel for $750. And he wants, he wants a waiver of the hotel tax for or 80% of the hotel tax for the first 10 years. What do you do on something like that when the guy's going to put $500 million into the convention center and another at $750 into the another hotel downtown? So it's not all that easy to have some of these trade-offs.
It's you're right on that. And by the way, the picture for hotels has changed, and the picture for the for conventions has changed radically. If we were having this conversation 9 months ago, there was a much stronger argument to make of you don't need as much help. Now it's a much riskier proposition to be building more hotel rooms and to invest in the convention center. But we also have to look at the long term. And we hope that these, recover, and we want to make sure that we are an attractive venue compared to other convention centers around the nation. So you are right. When we look at these circumstances today, there's perhaps a better argument than there may have been even just 9 months ago.
Okay. Barbara, then Carol, then Barbara Brody, okay?
Hi, Ron. It's great that you're here today. You mentioned looking at other ways to increase transparency. Can you share with us what you might suggest to do so, and what budget advocates might do to increase transparency?
Sure. Well, this has been a huge part of the priority for me ever since and even before I came into office. And I remember what started me on this whole thing was, years ago when I got a letter from my then council member explaining why I was never going to get my street repaved, essentially, or why it could take 30 years. In retrospect, 30 years may have been optimistic. But anyway, we created the city's first open data site. We partnered with a company then called Socrata, now called Tyler, to put that data out there. But by the way, that wasn't all the data, and it doesn't provide context in and of itself. But that software, that platform has evolved. Our understanding of data has evolved. There are a lot of new platforms that didn't exist before. Systems of the city are being upgraded. We're in the process of upgrading the payroll system of the city. And that's going to make it possible to pull data in a way that was not possible before, to much better manage. So this is something that continues to evolve. My desire is to find lots of different ways to visualize information, to provide reports to the public and to the departments, to make them as automated as possible, so that a lot of that data automatically gets fed into creating dashboards. I'm really interested in all sorts of different dashboards, some of which we've created in-house, some of which we've partnered with others, some of which we've copied from others. So it's going to continue to evolve a lot. And what transparency looks like 5 years from now is going to be very different than what it looks like today, hopefully. We've made huge progress, but I can see into the future what that might look like. And I'm really excited about those possibilities.
Harold Newman, did you have a question?
I think Julia, okay.
Barbara Brody, please.
Thank you. Thanks to the budget advocates. You guys dig into the stuff that most people like to close their eyes and wish about. I had a bunch of comments and questions that I think come up frequently. One, the drop program, it received the Day of Light, not only through city reports, but in the LA Times. And there appeared to be unanimous concern and a desire to seek change. And yet the contract seems to have been renewed. The program seems to go on. What can we do? Is this still a recurring problem? Secondly, the city is doing community plans and other rezoning activities, virtually restoring millions of dollars of property value free of charge on numbers of parcels across the city. Is there any way other than waiting for these to be redeveloped and reassessed for property tax that the city can benefit in some way from those kinds of activities? Next, I remember in the recession with staff cutbacks at City Hall, the terrible impact that had on morale for city employees, which resulted, I felt, in a terrible loss of productivity, which not only took place when the cuts were made, but afterwards as well. There was almost a bunkered mentality that existed for many. Many others worked twice as hard and did their best to make up for the shortfalls, but it hurt a lot. And I worry about that this time around and wonder how that kind of a thing can be avoided and productivity issues can be kept at the forefront. And that's even compounded with some people working at home. Lastly, I wanted to alert everyone about the fact that the city is on the verge of issuing and is writing a new RFP for the new street furniture program out of street services, the last one having been enforced for 20 years, having missed most of its revenue goals, and which allowed outdoor advertisers to put bus shelters on places perhaps where bus riders weren't riding and needing them, but where they could generate the most income for the company and a share for the city. And I'm very concerned that neighborhood councils and the public have not had a voice at all in the discussion of this, while the city has held private meetings with outdoor advertising companies and solicited written input via request for information. And I think we need to ask them to take a time out to talk to the community about what's wanted. So those are my lists for today's little chat. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hi, Barbara. It's great to see you. And it looks like you have a fascinating collection of rocks in the background.
Space rocks.
Space rocks. How
Yes.
cool is that? I've seen a lot of backgrounds on many Zoom calls, but this is a first. So very interesting. Barbara always asks some of the most interesting and poignant questions. So let me try and address all four of them, at least very briefly. Okay. So the DROP program, as many of you know, has been controversial in some circles for a number of years. There have been different analyses. This is whereby, for example, police officers can sort of retire, but then continue for up to another 5 years. The questions have always been, is that revenue neutral or not? I mean, the larger question right now, to be frank with you, besides the revenue aspect of it, is that we're not going to be doing much hiring of police officers for quite a while. I mean, it was a lot to get it up to 10,000. We're now, down from that number. There's not a great deal of likelihood that we're going to be hiring more people or hiring them in the same numbers as before. Moreover, there are going to be, I think, some challenges in recruitment for the foreseeable future for police departments across the country, in that there's a lot more tension between police departments and communities, and that makes some who are interested in a career in policing question whether that's what they want to do or not. And so I think the DROP program will probably be an important way that we hold on to people at least a little bit longer and not see a significant drop in the number of police officers that we have. I mean, again, we talk about the financial aspect of DROP, but I think the even more important question is going to become, how do we, there's a lot of talk about, and understandably so, about reimagining policing and to make sure it's more equitable, to root out the bad apples, all of that. But we also need a police department, and we need to make sure that we have the staffing to really keep our neighborhoods safe.
Then the issue maybe goes to disability abuse and how to clean the program up.
Well, I think a even more serious question, as you said, and we pointed this out, I've had a lot of real questions about workers' comp and about disability, and you could have a whole long conversation about that. That needs a tremendous amount of reform because you look at the numbers and they're really shocking and very expensive. Your second question was about community plans, and if a certain property is, I don't want to say upzoned, but allows for more development and increases the value of that property, can that then therefore be translated into an increase in our property tax revenue? Well, I mean, this is the question about Prop 13, as you know. It's now on the ballot to create essentially the equivalent of split roll, and it's a controversial issue. Commercial property owners say that you do this and you're going to force us to increase our rents on our businesses, and it's going to make it harder to do business in California. Moreover, you may have a parcel that gets upzoned, but if you're going to continue its current use, you don't necessarily benefit from the fact that it's been upzoned. So again, it's a very controversial issue. We're going to see what the voters decide on this fall. Your third question was about staffing cuts and morale. I am very concerned about that. As a matter of fact, just drafted a letter which we're going to send out to our own employees in the controller's department to try and keep up morale because they're working out of the house. And by the way, for many of them, it's been a benefit to work out of the house in some ways. For some of them, it's been a real drawback. But they're concerned about the de facto 10% cut that they're going to get, and who can blame them? And so we have to find ways to try and boost that morale. But I'll be honest with you, I share that same worry of what is it going to do to morale in the city. And then your last question was about street furniture. And I've done some reports and audits on this and about how the revenues have missed their goals. And by the way, they've missed their goals for a lot of reasons. They've missed their goals because of city officials and not knowing how to manage that contract, to be honest with you. They've missed those goals because, for example, we were supposed to generate a bunch of money from newsstands. Well, who sees a newsstand anymore with everybody buying their stuff and downloading it to their iPad? We were supposed to generate money from public bathrooms that could get wrapped. Well, that hasn't worked out very well. And what advertiser wants to put their stuff on a bathroom right now? And then you look at the state of our bus shelters. Bus ridership is down. Actually, 6 years in a row, bus ridership is down. Many of them are in disrepair. We have many of them that are now sort of shelters more for those experiencing homelessness. And so if you're an advertiser, you're not all that anxious to spend your money on some of these bus shelters. And so the monies that were going to be realized from this are significantly less. We need to really rethink what does a street furniture contract look like, and what kind of advertisements are going to be popular in the coming years. But there's a lot of reasons why those revenues have fallen short, and we need to rethink the whole thing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Galperin. That's a great response, and thank you for your question, Barbara. Again, Mr. Galperin, thank you so much for joining us today. I do know that we've kept you, you stayed quite longer than you were expected, so thank you again. This was really great to kind of rack your brain on some of these ideas and issues surrounding our city.
Well, I really so appreciate the partnership with the budget advocates and with all the work that you do. And this conversation, which I think is just so very, very important. And there's a lot of things you could be doing on a Saturday now afternoon. And here you are talking about the city budget, which I think says a tremendous amount of the dedication of the people who are on this Zoom call. And I look forward to continue working with all of you to getting your ideas, your thoughts, criticisms, all of the above, to how we can do better, which we have to do better, and to find ways to emerge from this stronger over the course of the next couple of years. And lastly, I will thank Christina Yavara, who's with my office, who has been also helping to not only arrange this, but show some of the visuals. So much of the work that you see on my website and in our office does not happen without really terrific people who are working really hard, especially under these circumstances. So, we are indebted to them.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. Take care, stay healthy, stay safe, and can't wait to see you all in person in the not too distant future.
All right.
Be well.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Thank you, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and continue on. We still want to hear your thoughts and concerns and questions for any of our panel. I see Pamela, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Not a question, but a comment, especially related to Barbara's topic of morale in the city workers. I am not aware of what's gone on with contract disputes and things with the unions for the city people. But as a retired teacher, I can tell you that for 42 years, more often than not, I gave up a raise, including not even a cost of living, in order to protect my health benefits and my pension. And now that I am retired, I'm damn glad about it. And I hope that we're not just going to think that the unions and the pensions that they've gotten for their people are this monster that has to be attacked. And that's the reason for this huge problem, because I think probably in many cases, these are people who have worked their lives to count on that in their retirement, and the fact that it's there is a comfort and a reason to keep on working. So I hope you'll just consider that.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela. Just to maybe respond to that on because obviously we know Jack has been very vocal about that elephant in the room. To speak to for the rest of what our committee is really doing is we're trying to understand them. And the way that we paint it as a monster, yes, we should probably change our verbiage there, because rather than that, we want to call it the elephant, and really understand that, like you said, it's a lot of this is related to the morale and the services that we're going to receive, whether that be the people that are working on our streets or the people that we're interacting with when we go down to the city for any number of their services. I just think that the budget advocates, it's our responsibility to really digest and explain, like earlier, that employee costs are truly 85% of our city budget. Go ahead, Jack.
On the pensions, a couple things. One is that if you're vested in a pension, you're vested. They can't go back and take that away. The issue that you have is how much is it costing every year to fund these pensions? And from the city's point of view, it's gone from about 10% of the general fund to 20%, and if you looked at some projections, it will be 25% in about 3 or 4 years. And that assumes that you're going to make a decent rate of return. One of the things that, we've asked for is a pension review committee, if you will. Tell us what the situation is and what are some of the things you can do to stabilize it and, eliminate the deficit over the next, 25, 30 years, something like that. I mean, it's going to take a long time. And one of the things that you probably have to address are some of what they call the California rule. So, like when you come to work at the City of Los Angeles, you're vested in all the programs that they have, and they can't modify them like they have done in the corporate sector. So it's a monster. It's an elephant. Putting it another way, it's a hell of a problem because it's chewing up 20 to 25% of the general fund. LAUSD, the city looks good relative to LAUSD, especially with regards to the post-retirement medical benefits. LAUSD is, their liability, I think, is, $7 billion for the pensions and like $11 billion for the medical benefits. It's not a very pleasant situation.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. You know, one of the things, there's a couple comments, and I won't call them out by name, but a couple comments that were actually very, specifically related to labor in the chat. One thing that I would encourage everyone here to do is, as you come up with these questions, especially related to, the year-over-year analysis of our city budget. And I can see the questions specifically here were related to, LAPD, and then in general, every year, are we seeing a 3% labor increase in our city workforce? What is the cadence of their increases? What is the justification or the drivers behind that? I think all of those questions are, inherently what our committee, our team of 36 people are here to do. And, I think that this is actually something great to take back there for us, to have some of our teams maybe do like a cross-cutting analysis of our labor force in the city to produce a report for you.
Yeah, you mentioned the labor contracts. The city budget has two problems from my perspective. One is, you have all the impact of the virus on the seven economically sensitive taxes. That's the property tax, the utility tax, the business tax or gross receipts tax, sales tax, the hotel tax, the documented transfer tax, and parking. So that's the first problem. I think that's hitting us like $50 million a month shortfall versus projections. The other thing is the structural deficit. And back in October, or back in the fall, the city entered into new labor arrangements with the cops and the firefighters that blew a $1.6 billion hole in the budget at that point in time. So we're looking at a structural deficit, because of some changes to pensions over the next 4 years of about $750 million to $800 million, and including about $225 million next year. And the question is, how are they going to balance the budget? And so you have this whole labor situation, which is very difficult. The labor unions have a lot of SWAT. They have great campaign contributions. They have a lot of people that work there. And in very many ways, they are the priority of the members of the city council and the mayor, I might add, versus, let's say, the Angelinos. So the labor agreement issues are, I think, really significant. And I haven't seen, you don't have open, I think we ought to have open labor negotiations. I think we should have rules that if the city enters into a contract, there's not going to be a deficit. I mean, Pamela talking about, I presume you were at LAUSD when they had the recent settlement with the UTLA. I think was it January of 19? Was it? Yeah, it was about a year and a half ago. They didn't have the money, and Garcetti comes out and said, "Well, it's going to take a leap of faith financing." So they're running a deficit. They put double E, Measure E on the ballot, the $500 million parcel tax. And I think they needed 2/3 to pass it, and it only got 45%. So it's a very tough situation where people aren't trusting LAUSD. It's not that they don't trust guys like you. It's just they don't trust the system, and I think that's sort of the issue we have with the city. All our councilmen are great Americans. They'll tell you what they're going to do for you, but you got a system in there that is just going to continue to to be what I believe relatively inefficient. They fight any moves to do benchmarking, which is a standard operating procedure for any, should be for any major enterprise. And it's just going to be a very, very, tough situation. And, actually somebody talked about Prop 15. What are the voters going to do about Prop 15? It's going to be great for the city, if you will, because they'll get a couple $100 million in revenues. On the other hand, when you talk about it, those costs, the 77% increase in property and commercial property taxes for commercial industrial properties, that's going to be passed along to us. I mean, we're going to get that one way or another, and that's the equivalent of about a 2 to 2.5% increase in our sales tax, or a 20% increase in our property taxes. So if I went up to you and say, "Hey, Pamela, do you want me to raise your property tax, your sales tax by 2%?" You're going to look at me like I'm from Mars. The answer is not going to be no. It's going to be hell no. So it's a very difficult situation that the city's in, And they haven't, from my perspective, they haven't really taken a lot of efforts. While I'm on my bandwagon, the city's a relatively easy entity to understand. Unlike, let's say, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, a lot of these, eastern cities, the city of Los Angeles is not responsible for K through 12 education or community colleges. It's not responsible for all the welfare programs and social services. That's the county. It's not responsible for transportation. That's Metro. It's not responsible for criminal justice. That's the DA or the county. And we're not responsible for the jails. That's the sheriff. I love these little controversy right about now. So we have a very simple, what I believe a relatively simple government compared to a lot of the other big cities. I mean, I would say that, our major responsibilities are, one, public safety. So that's the cops and the firefighters. And the second one is infrastructure. Our streets, our sidewalks, our parks, our libraries, things along those lines. And, and Ron was right. We don't have a lot of debt, on the books type of debt other than the sewer department. But, we're in relatively good shape that way. But in terms of pensions and deferred maintenance, we're not, maybe we're better at deferred maintenance than some of these other guys. But, sort of saying we're better than some of these other cities like New York City, that ain't saying us, that ain't saying a whole lot.
I have to back Jack up on one of his points, in that the issue isn't the unions so much as it's the city council not taking those negotiations, which they knew about, they were in the middle of them, into consideration when they drew up not this year's budget, but last year's budget. And this seems to be an ongoing situation where they have these meetings behind closed doors and decide, oh, we'll deal with it here, we'll deal with it there. We need to know what's going on so that we can have a voice. And right now we have an emergency situation, and they're doing everything behind closed doors again, and they're not opening up the information to the people, and they're not allowing the people to speak up. And I think that is wrong. I think that, I may not have the answer, but I bet you there's somebody out there here that will have an answer to pretty much every single problem that's come up. And I'm hoping that maybe some of you do. So do any of you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I think we definitely like to hear some, from more of our attendees here. We have just about 30 people. Half of us are with the budget advocates. But if you haven't been involved with us before, please ask us anything. Ask us, again, like how you can get involved. Because I think like one of the things that, Jack did a great job on throughout his discussions this morning and touching on is that the budget is really the capstone for every single issue that we're going to come across in this city. When you say that, our session's called the city budget, we could talk about anything we want here, because literally everything that we do is going to tie back to the dollars that are allocated to it by our city council, whether that be our homelessness issues, our issues around the infrastructure, every single thing, and whether you want to meet independently on committees to specifically address that, you're going to end up in front of the Budget and Finance Committee and in front of City Council justifying your expenditures. So here, perfect. I see a bunch of hands up now. We'll start with Vivian. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So you said we could ask anything.
Yeah, please.
Very much for that clarification, because that's pretty much what I'm going to do. Is that, again, we need additional transparency with where our funding is going. The mayor rejected that we lower the parking violations, which again, we have a situation here and everywhere that parking is a major problem. Again, addressing the TOC, the TODs that Boyle Heights does not support. We would prefer the new urban development of new bungalows for single units, 1 bedrooms with parking, which is we know will be beneficial to us. So again, we are overtaxed. And as I mentioned in the chat, DMB has so many taxes on us, we don't even know where that money goes. We don't know where the parking enforcement money goes. We do know that we are having less city projects being taken care of, and but we don't understand why. And I think we also need transparency with our police enforcement, law enforcement. Maybe they need to adjust their contract, because we really do need, mental health, to address mental health issues here. We have shut down and kicked out all of the mentally, challenging people, back during Reaganomics. And, we're not really talking about that or doing anything about that. Hence when the Parker Center wanted to be repurposed for transitional living by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, it was rejected. And then the mayor turns around and what? Demolishes it and then builds up, high rent office buildings. I mean, I think that's a conflict when down the street, he's got Skid Row. So, where is our money really going? I mean, I would say, again, I put it in the chat, smaller departments, more accountability, and really let's get the job done, because nothing is getting done. The infrastructure is falling apart. These developers are literally owning all of us, and they're lobbyists and they're paying and own our government. At least that's how we feel. And if that's not the truth, then let's get some transparency here. But if we want to go ahead and balance the budget, I think that there are many of us would feel that we could probably help you do that. And the spending on advertising and marketing, when we already have that in our departments, again, the abundance of money that is being spent, we need caps on the various departments, on almost every department. They really should not have any credit cards or debit cards to go out and eat, number one. And number two, we just really need to focus on, if it was a private corporation, how would it be managed? Because it's not being managed correctly. This is not your money, so you go and you spend it, and we are shocked by the our state collapsing because we are overtaxed and we have less accountability for that. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I think that brings up one thing that we've requested for a number of years, which is a city manager, which would be an overall view and addressing all of these things across departments. Gary, your hand's up next.
Actually, just sorry, but before Gary to chime in, Vivian, I'd like to actually direct you at least to a very small piece of this pie in terms of like where the revenues are going. Buried within the CAO's website, and I'm not going to bore everybody with taking you there now, but literally if you go to cao.lacitybudget.org, you're going to be able to do a little bit of research and fact finding. And again, the budget advocates are here to assist with that. But in front of every department budget are sources of funding. So you'll at least be able to very, very high and at what, coming from, the finance world, a very poor level of detail and something that would in fact be unacceptable in the corporate environment. But you can in fact find out where the money comes from. Also, the people then responsible for collecting and counting our revenues are the Office of Finance. Okay, this Office of Finance, every time I've reached out to them, and like you might not be able to tell that personnel, but we can always help you. They've been very responsive in terms of how many, what's the current revenues, directing you to certain reports. Like just do that. There are some places out there to at least get you started. But again, that's why we're here. So thank you. Gary, please go ahead. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Gary Fordyce. I would call upon an organized neighborhood council community income, I'm thinking too fast here, community impact statement, organized effort, demanding transparency and a voice to budget advocates on all closed door fiscal sessions before they vote, and require advance notification to the budget advocates for advance responses. If we all got together and started using our cumulative voice, perhaps our city would hear us.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Patricia, Pat?
I think to amplify on what Liz said about everything happening behind closed doors, it isn't just financial. It seems like just about everything to do with homelessness, everything to do, well, for example, with the Sepulveda Basin, the way the neighborhood councils are the last people to hear about it. They're not someone the city reaches out to ever when developing policy. And, you know, you just kind of have to watch what's going on in city council and be very surprised with what's coming up. So I think this is kind of a done problem where they kind of need to lean on the city council and the mayor's office to really include the neighborhood councils in actions that they're contemplating. So
Yeah, thank you very much, Pat. Just to speak a little bit on that in terms of the I think earlier someone was talking about like the strength, and actually I think it was Mayor Garcetti himself, the strength of neighborhood councils. And I think that, this is my kind of personal belief here, but that through the neighborhood council system, the one thing that the city and our officials have made sure is they've disenfranchised us all, because now we have 99 different opinions, and it's very, very hard to use anything other than a half a day on a Saturday to get together and start cracking heads on some of this stuff. And, again, where I'm personally aligned is that what I think that we've been dancing around for quite some time here is, campaign finance reform, and exactly how related the hands on our politicians are to the production and the work product that is our budget. We see it every year, and without tens of thousands of people, and to kind of put opinions aside on what the people's budget of LA did, they got 30-something thousand people to take a survey, and they got 30,000 voices behind an idea that got them time in front of the city council to truly propose and flesh out their ideas. And now we can see that at least some wheels are turning. Unfortunately, and I think what Mr. Galbraith said earlier, this isn't sexy. Talking about dollars and cents oftentimes turns people away from things because they hear about math. But you're right, and I probably misspoke when I said everything is about the budget. It's like everything is about money, and money is unfortunately subject to corruption. So I would urge you all here. I know a number of comments have been made as to whether we've circulated any particular CIS or community impact statement templates yet. We have not. However, every one of our budget advocate committees who is talking about a specific subject, and sometimes multiple subjects that we've discussed here today, is going to be producing a report over the next month or two that will have a CIS attached for you to co-sign or to alter to kind of get behind the spirit of this. Because truly what we're trying to do as the budget advocate committee is move away from what Liz talked about in siloization. And rather than between city departments, it's between us on the neighborhood councils. So I unfortunately have to log off. So the one thing I want to leave you with is that your neighborhood council has budget representatives. And if they do not, they absolutely must. You can have a homeless rep and liaison, you can have an environmentalist, and you can have an aging representative. But if you don't have anybody that's going to talk about the budget specifically with us and come to our meetings and bring back, the reports that Jack's making on the ins and outs of finances, some of the other things we're uncovering on our committees regarding, transparency, you're just not going to know, and you're going to continue not to know. So please reach out to us, visit our website, thebudgetadvocates.org. It's beautiful now. It's got our contact information on there, and start coming to our meetings. They are important. And with that, I will turn it back over to our co-chairs. Thank you all for your time today, guys. This has been great. Thank you. Oh, I think you're both on mute. Liz. There you go. Take care, everyone.
I think that part of what we do is about services, because it's the services that are paid for with the budget. So I think a couple of people brought up services that aren't being addressed. I think parking in Boyle Heights was one of them. I think that there's other people are experiencing other things. Do you have specific concerns about services that are not being addressed because they're not being budgeted for? Is there anybody has any questions about that? Okay, looks like no. Jack, do you have anything else to say?
I could probably think of lots of things to say. No, I think that, this has been, do we have a cutoff time at 1 o'clock? Is that what it is?
I believe it's 1:30. I think it's.
Okay.
We're scheduled till 2:30. Should the folks like to stick around and continue the discussion?
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of issues that, need to, that we need to, that need to be addressed. And, let me just, where did I put that stupid thing here? It's the service deficits, it's intergenerational theft, which is, one of my hot buttons. One of the things that was mentioned is, if you have ideas, you can contact your budget representative, assuming, you have one of your president, but you also can contact us directly. And I think what's the email address? What is it? info@budgetadvocates.org.
That's it. Or they can go on our website and hit the contact button.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that's going to happen over the next, several weeks, I would imagine over the next month, is going to be the whole budget. How do they budget everything, or how do they balance the budget? And my gut feel is, and I think Ron was there, that, we're sort of on a run rate of, maybe losing 400 million, being $400 million below projections. And that's going to mean that, and you heard that most of the expenses are people related, personnel related. And so we're going to have a pretty ugly situation over the next, whatever period it is, next 6 months, next year. One of the just to give you an idea of one of the situations that arose is that the mayor's budget, which he presented on April 20th, which did not take into consideration the impact of the virus. It had furloughs of anywhere between $80 to $100 million, $80 and $150 million. People were going to lose 26 civilian workers, 15,000 civilian workers would get 26 unpaid days off throughout the year. The coalition of city unions went bonkers on that, and the city went out there and said, okay, we'll start this separation incentive program, which allowed eligible employees to retire early with a payment of $10,000 this year and another, basically give or take, $70,000 next year. That was supposed to save all sorts of money. Well, it only ended up saving, we're going to spend $100 million, and it only ended up net saving us $13 million. So that was a bust, but it was, and it was a bust from the beginning, but it was pushed ahead because that's sort of what the coalition of city unions wanted. We had very little discussion of that at the Budget and Finance Committee or at City Hall. To overcome this furlough situation, they've done two things. One is we talked about the $150 million being taken from the police budget, primarily overtime. Of that amount, about $40 or $50 million went to fund the furloughs that weren't fixed for. And then in addition to which, the city is going to basically furlough civilian workers 18 days over the next, for the rest of the year, starting on October 11th. And they are allowed to do that because of the declaration of financial emergency, although I'm sure we haven't heard the rest of this. So it's going to be a very dynamic situation. I would imagine most of these negotiations are going to be held behind closed doors, and it's going to be presented as, guys, here's the deal, where there will be very little input, period. For example, when they blew a hole in the budget back in October, we went down to the personnel committee where they were going to discuss it, and Paul Koretz wouldn't talk about it. This is the guy who wants to be our next controller, but he wouldn't talk about the budget and the whole of the budget. He basically gave us 1 minute of public comment, and you asked for documents or analysis, told us to go look at the council file, and there was no analysis in there, but that's a minor detail. So it's going to be a wild ass time over the next 3 or 4 months. Assuming that the city starts to address the upcoming budget issue. One of the things they're doing is, if you look at the numbers, the city is assuming that everything's going to be hunky-dory, back to normal come January 1st. Well, I sure hope that's going to be the situation. But I mean, I like to think my wife and I go out to dinner a couple times a week. Life is good for us. We do this, we do that. We go to the movies. We ain't going anywhere. We're cooking at home. We're ordering our groceries at home. Maybe drinking too much, and maybe I got the COVID-19. Sort of like the freshman 15 when you go off to college. We're just not doing anything, and I'm sure I'm not the only. We're the only people that are doing that. Our restaurants in Larchmont Village, they're basically closed. There's all sorts of for sale, for lease signs up there, and I'm sure that's true, throughout the city. And so I think we're going to be in for a pretty interesting time. And I don't have this is me, and maybe Ron likes to say he's an optimist. I guess I've started to turn into a pessimist because I've been pounding my head against the wall for so many years. But I don't see us getting out of this mess real soon. I mean, one of my hot buttons is, since Eric's been mayor, we've had record revenues. It's been up, 50%, a couple of $1 billion. And yet we're, prior to the virus, we were still talking about having a deficit. They talk about the reserve fund. The reserve fund should have been at 10%. It was only at like 6% or 7%. They took monies from the budget stabilization fund, and to a certain extent, we're gonna see a lot of duct tape, piano wire holding this budget together. And I would not be surprised to see something on the ballot. And from my perspective, I'm not a big favorite. I think we're the highest tax state in the country. If we're not, we're damn close to it. And I think we have an allocation problem. But if we're going to go out there and have, they want to raise money from us, that's fine. But I want to see some reform. I want to see, how are you going to balance the budget? Are you going to, I don't know exactly, live within the city, make the city live within its means, or use generalized accounting. But it's going to be, that they need to earn our respect. They need to earn our trust and confidence. So I'm sorry for babbling on.
It's okay. We've got some people waiting. First Barbara, then Carol, then Gary, and then I have a question for Jack. Barbara? Unmute your...
I got it. This is really, I think, geared more to semi, because as neighborhood councils have had to...
it also seems like it's
Oh, all right. Is Vivian on? Oh, no.
We're taking care of audio issues. Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay. As communities have had to address needs in the community related to the pandemic situation, and as the city will cut back on budgets of neighborhood councils as well as city departments, it often presents opportunities for neighborhood councils to do more. Yet we are not permitted to seek grant funding. We are not nonprofit organizations. We don't have the ability to seek grants, nor can we even contribute to our alliances who are not nonprofit organizations. How can Dunn look at those policies and either provide a mechanism for us to seek grants from outside foundations and organizations, and or to sponsor programs on our own, without all of the having to look for other groups to house us and to work through people, making it harder and harder for us to do our job. I don't think these jobs are really what the neighborhood councils were intended to do, but no one's doing them. And we are on the ground and we know where the needs are and can effectively do a lot of these things. But I find that some of the red tape just makes it harder and harder, and people feel it's worth the effort sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Barbara. I mean, certainly within the neighborhood council system, and for those of us here, there's a lot of dedication and creativity and care into the city's financial stability and the city's growth. So happy to take this back to our team and look at a mechanism in how a neighborhood council would be able to incorporate into a nonprofit. Happy to take it back.
And I'd like to address very
No,
briefly.
we don't actually individually need to be nonprofits, but we need to be able to have some mechanism to be able to accept nonprofit designated funds and to work with other nonprofits in that way.
I think
Definitely as a like a grant mechanism. Sorry, Liz.
it's okay.
Our budget's being cut. We don't have the money we need to do our work. How do we get it?
I think that to a certain extent, this goes back to the city is giving neighborhood councils more and more to do. And to a certain extent, that's a distraction for calling out the city for not doing what they're supposed to do, which the neighborhood councils are now having to take on. So we can think about that. Moving on to Carol Newman.
Okay, thank you, Liz. I'm just responding to what Jack was saying before. I think we really don't know what the end date is of what we're going through right now. I saw a study in the newspaper that said that perhaps as many as 44% of small businesses in California may close as a result of what's going on in the short term. And I mean, a lot of them have been hanging on by a thread as it is. And the longer this goes on, I mean, infections are up again in LA County. So the longer this goes on, the more we're going to see businesses dying. And certainly if the split roll passes, more businesses are going to die, a lot more businesses. So I think we really don't know what the end date is, and we can't assume there's going to be a particular time when everything's going to be getting better. I mean, clearly there will be a time, but we don't know if it's next year or 2022 or 2023. We don't know right now. So we can't make plans based on what we don't know. We can only make plans based on what's right in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Gary Fortis.
Yes, Gary Fordyce. Thank you. I've estimated with the calendar starting October 11 that we have 58 potential work days, 18 of which will be furloughed. That represents 31% of the workforce in the city. And add to that the early retirement incentives. Question, Jack, where do you see this impacting the Angelenos? You know, obviously there's a lot of city services that are going to fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be across the board, Gary. It's going to be whether, it's going to, are there enough people to go out there and fix potholes? The sidewalks, they're under a consent decree to fix those. But, what about the parks? All right, Recon Parks has been, pillaged by the full cost recovery program. Pat, if I want to get Pat Bates upset, all I have to do is mention Recon Parks and the full cost recovery program, and she goes bananas. And that would be polite. But it's going to be basically less services, or you want to do some. It's going to be the urban forest. It's just going to be nickels and dimes here and there. A lot of things you won't see. Hopefully you don't have to deal with the city in any bureaucratic ways. It might, if you're a developer or somebody that has to deal with planning, they may be missing a few bodies there. So that takes some time. Building and safety, if you have, you got to get some approvals. Theoretically, that's a revenue base. On the other hand, planning might say, okay, if you're going to submit a plan, the fee goes from $1,000 to $10,000. I think actually they're doing so. I think somebody's doing something along those lines. When you file a complaint, they want to hit you up for a lot of money. Barbara, you may know something about that. Barbara Brody may know something about that. But there's some kind. You're just going to get nickel and dime, and you're not going to see it, and it's just going to keep on eroding services.
Okay, Jorge. Jorge Arenas. Go ahead.
You got to unmute yourself.
I think he is. Oh, we need to get back to him. Jack, could you briefly explain what intergenerational theft is for the people who may not know?
Well, Basically what it is, two things. One is it's essentially passing on to the next generation expenses that should have been paid today that we're kicking the can down the road. Putting it maybe a little bit different way is we're dumping huge amounts of debt and unfunded liabilities onto the next generation. And in particular, I think that, they're not funding, for example, they're not funding the repair of our streets. So, they kick that can down the road, the streets get in even worse condition. That's going to have to be paid for at some point in time. And when a road deteriorates, just to resurface costs $10 to reconstruct it, it costs $50. So, it's very expensive money. But the way I'm looking at it is we have about $10 billion of deferred maintenance. We have $15 billion of pension debt, and that's probably understated. So we're passing on $25 billion to the next generation. So it's sort of like you die and it's supposed to leaving an inheritance. Your kids have to pay off your debts.
Jorge, Jorge, can you speak?
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Good.
Okay.
Job. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I was explaining, I'm not a part of a neighborhood council at the moment, but I have reached out to my local neighborhood council to be more involved. And I was just wondering if, since many of you serve as budget advocates, what kind of actionable results have you been able to achieve historically, or what kind of in what ways has your advocacy helped transform a certain issue that you guys are passionate about?
I think that things don't happen overnight. We see our recommendations show up in our reports, and then nothing happens. And then 2 years later, somebody in City Hall goes, "Oh, wow, that's a great idea," and introduces it. And it takes another 3 years for it to get anywhere. But I believe we had this looked at a couple of years ago, and about 60 to 70% of our recommendations had actually been gone through the system at once in one form or another. Jack, do you have anything specific?
Well, I think one of the big ones was like the Inspector General for, revenue that they did with the Department of Public, I think it was the Department of Public Works or the Office of Finance. But to answer your question, Jorge, it's very tough. You're so to speak, you're fighting City Hall, and to get them to do anything, especially when they're not as transparent, it's a tough road to go.
And if you are not a member of your neighborhood council, that doesn't stop you from getting involved at all levels, either the neighborhood council level, or you can get involved with budget advocates or many of the other groups. So, do reach out. We have a number of committees on our website if you're interested in any of those. One thing I'd like to bring up, because of Jack's mentioning that 25 billion being kicked down the road, of the 10, as of I think 3 or 4 years ago when it was mentioned, probably a lot more now, needed to upgrade our infrastructure. This is something that will obviously cost a huge amount of money and needs to be planned over multiple years. The cost of borrowing money at this point is low, but if you look at it as a lot cheaper than the ongoing repairs and then coming through and slopping black stuff on your roads every 3 months or 6 months or every month down the road for me. And we look at all the lawsuits that come out of, tires coming off, bicyclists getting thrown, it's people tripping over broken concrete. I think that it is cost effective to make that investment. What remains is to make these people accountable, that they can't spend their money on hiring outside consultants, which is a not insignificant portion of the money of the HHS funds going to projects, went to outside consultants. So we have to have a plan in place to move forward. The way things start is you talk about it. You talk about it in your neighborhood councils, you talk about it to your friends, you talk about it to your family, and you do the CIS, you come send messages to budget advocates, you show up at City Hall, you call your council members, you just keep doing it. Because unless we speak out, nothing's going to change. Barbara? Barbara? Speak? Your hand's up from before, maybe. Okay. Jack, do you have any final words, since I think that is Gary, did you speak already?
Oh, yes, I did. I have an additional question.
Go ahead.
Jack, back to intergenerational theft. It also impacts the current Angelino. And since one of the largest percentages of our unhoused community, the homeless, are indeed seniors, a lot of this taxation is putting seniors onto the street. They're losing their homes. I mean, you look at HHH, linkage fee, all these things that were done for homelessness that seem to have accomplished nothing have actually put additional people on the street, from everything I understand. So do you have any comment on the current generation? Thank you.
Well, in very ways, we've been burdened by intergenerational theft. In that, today we've inherited a $15 billion pension liability that looks like it will grow. Well, we're being burdened by crappy streets because they haven't fixed them. So, when 20% of the money goes to, 20 to 25% of the money goes to the pension plans, a lot of which is, some of which maybe 40% pays for the, current, when you earn pension credits, let's say 50% goes to pay for your current thing, but 40, let's say 50% goes to pay for the unfunded liability. So we're getting tagged with that, and then that impacts your ability to do a lot of things, including the homeless things. I mean, the homeless issue from my perspective. First of all, I thought Ron did a very good report, and I think he's done 2 reports now that basically show that we're spending just like $531,000 per unit. I don't necessarily like that. I'd like to know what it is per square foot per bed. But I know, personally, my wife and I have invested in some private situations as flyaway homes, and we're creating beds at a significantly lower price than the city. I mean, significantly lower. These are taking these old containers and turning them into stacking them up and turning them into housing. But the thing is you have not only the intergenerational theft, you just have loads of inefficiency here. To build a $500,000 unit, I think the overhead costs are 30 to 40%. Ranging, going through the, going through the city stuff, plans, as opposed to construction. And so we're paying the price today for the intergenerational theft of the past. I don't know if that answered your question, Gary, but
yes, it does, and thank you very much.
And Jack mentioned the report from Ron Galpin. The link to his reports is up on the budgetadvocates.org website under resources, along with a link to his control panel, both of which are very useful places to dig around, get some information.
Yeah. I guess the one thing I'd say, and this is a little bit of a plug for Ron. He's been about the only guy. He has been the only guy that I think that's been somewhat honest with us. Whether it's these various audits, and you heard him today. I mean, he obviously has to be a little politic, and he can't go call his compadres at City Hall a bunch of knuckleheads or spendthrifts or whatever it is. But he's from my perspective, he's done a very good job, and he's been very candid. He would probably be, from my perspective, would be a reason why you don't want to have term limits, but he's termed out. My understanding is that he's thinking of running for state controller, which, I think he's filed papers for that. I was a little disappointed in that. I wanted to see him run for mayor, but that's not going to happen, I guess. but he's done a very good job with us, and I thought he did an excellent job with us today. And by the way, I'm not paid. He's not paying me. I'm not on his campaign staff or anything along those lines.
I'll second your sentiments.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay,
One other thing, for some of you who would, I mentioned this at the beginning of my talk. Julia Moser, who's a budget advocate, who's also affiliated with the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council, rah-rah, that's mine too, is made two I thought, very good hour-long presentations. One is what we call what she calls Budget 101, which was basically an hour session with Ron and myself addressing or is directed to the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council, but I think a lot of other people looked at it. And the other one is, sort of City Council 101, where Julia worked with the Chief of Staff for David Rue's office. He's our councilman, and with Nick Greif, who I thought did a marvelous job. He's very articulate. He's very knowledgeable. But that's, I think you can go to those things on Facebook / Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council, and you can find links to these two things. But she did a really good job, and I think hopefully we'll be able to get her to do some more stuff. I hope she doesn't find a real high-paying job, because then we'll really be out of luck. So.
Thanks, Jack.
Okay.
But,
go ahead. Jack, did you have any words of wisdom to say to wrap up this session?
I think I've said enough.
As have I. Would like to thank all of you for coming and staying for as long as you have. It's been over 2 hours for some of you. And do get involved if it's not with the budget advocates. If your neighborhood council doesn't have a budget rep, go in and volunteer. A number of us are not members of neighborhood councils. We can still be budget reps. We can still be budget advocates. But the worst thing for people to do is to do nothing. So glad you showed up.
Hello. Could you just briefly explain how one would do what you just mentioned?
Well, one thing, Jorge, would be is, if you have questions or thoughts, send them to info@budgetadvocates.org. The other, what neighborhood, you're not with the neighborhood council, right?
No, yeah. See, I reached out about a couple of weeks ago to my neighborhood council, but I haven't really received a response. I had a phone call with their correspondent secretary, but I feel like they might.
Where do you live, Jorge? What neighborhood council are you?
LA 32.
LA 32. Okay, we actually have we have a budget.
I believe Liz Anston, right?
Albert Farias, isn't that Albert?
No, LA 32 is in Region 8. That's Jorge, if you send me an email, I will connect you with their people, because I am in touch with them.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I should also add, we just launched a new website, and there's a page on it where you can look up who is your budget advocate by your neighborhood council.
Yeah, and that'd be me for LA 32. So.
What's the URL, Julia?
It's budgetadvocates.org. If you type in .com, it'll also come up, or our old website. And it's under resources. If you click find your region and budget advocate, it's every neighborhood council. And there are a couple that don't have that it's pending, just because those regions are a little bit fuzzy, but most of them, they're up there, and they have the link to email your advocate.
Okay.
Jack and Liz, this is Gary. Just a quick thought. As co-chairs, and thank you for what you do, and Julia as well, great job. Please consider the budget advocates having a discussion on inspiring some kind of CIS effort through the 99 councils, demanding transparency and budget advocate pre and following information on all these fiscal things, so that we're not blindsided like all the raises last year. it might be, it's the only way I can think to be heard is we need the help and the support of all the neighborhood councils. So perhaps the budget advocates can have that discussion.
I think that was actually discussed at a retreat. I'll go back and see who was going to take that on.
All right, thank you, Liz.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Carol? No, okay.
It's just waving,
Oh.
the clapping hand.
I should have put my contacts in. Okay, thank you all. Keep on doing. It's important. Thanks.
See you later.